Hello, welcome back to Kim Reads. Merry Christmas and whatever you celebrate. So, continue with Christmas bedtime stories. Not Evan A. Mouse. I am the one mouse who should need no introduction. I belong among the ranks of the great mice in history, like Doc from Hickory Dickory and Sir Nipsey, who nibbled the lion free from his net. I too changed the course of world events. If it hadn't been for me, there wouldn't be no proof that Santa truly exists. No letters from the North Pole, no snacks set out on Christmas Eve. Oh, you know my story, or at least one version of it. But you don't need to know my name, and it's all because of Professor Moore's poor penmanship. Let me set the record straight. I am Evan A. Mouse. Listen to these famous lines, you'll understand my frustration. 'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. My place in history blurred forever because of a misspelled capital letters and a poorly written vowel. If only the line had been properly penned, not Evan A. Mouse, I wouldn't have to defend myself today. First, my credentials. I am a member of Mus Legendarius, when the one scientific community called Legendary Mouse, from those of you not up from Latin. We LMs lie extraordinarily long lived, and as I lived before, and as I said before, we must find ourselves at a key place in history. I was just a youngster in those days, beginning my life's work as a house mouse. It was my job to supervise the Moore household, not an easy task, I tell you, because of the four humans who lived there. First, there was Professor Clement Moore. A teacher, he was forever leaving books, inkwells, and papers all over the house. It took many nibbles in his lecture for me to break him of this sloppy habit. Mrs. Moore had the human illness known in our trade as female mousophobia. Her greatest fear was that I would take over her job in the home. When I would quietly remind the professor to tidy up before house here and there, Mrs. Moore would panic. She would go on a cleaning rampage for a week just to get me out of that way. Women, who can understand them, the Moore's children, Bartley and Belinda, seemed to be more normal for their race, loud and noisy. What more can I say? All human children look alike to me. But back in the night in question, December 24th, 1821, if you are familiar with Professor Moore's famous poem, then you know how he portrayed the events. Let me tell you what really happened. The professor leads you to believe his home was a calm and peaceful place that Christmas Eve. Now, I must ask you, have you ever known any children dwelling to be quiet the day before Christmas? Last minute shopping, wrapping up gifts, gorging up goodies, relatives arriving by the dozens, anything but peace. Bartley Belinda had picked out one other day. Bartley would pin his little red stocking in the chimney, and Belinda snatched it down and reached around the house, waving it over her head. Bartley believes in Santa Claus, ha ha ha. At bedtime, the feathers flew in at a horrendous pillow fight as those two jumped from bed to bed. Bartley got in one mood swing that knocked out loose tooth Belinda had been wiggling for 2 weeks. Professor Moore stalked out of his study, rubbing his temples. Mrs. Moore began shrieking, "I don't care if it is Christmas Eve. If I hear one more peep out of you two." I knew there would be no Merry Christmas if I, Evan A. Mouse, didn't do something. I sent the adults to bed with earplugs and a bottle of aspirin, getting the younger Moores to settle down with some doing. I used the oldest trick in the house mouse book of child management bribery. You call Professor Moore's line something about sugar plums. I promised massive amounts of candy to the child who could fall asleep first. It worked like a charm. At last the household was quiet. I treated my observatory up in the house where I had my first-rate telescope. The night was promised to be good viewing. I was looking at Constellation Orion when my strange movement in the house caught my eye. Fascinated, I watched as the speck darted from one planet to another. A careful record of the movement showed that the speck, where it was, traveled to Mercury, Venus, and Mars in less than 2 hours. At the point that speck turned and headed directly from Earth, Professor Moore should witness this phenomenon, I thought. Made a mad dash to his bedroom. The aspirin I'd given earlier had done its job. The professor was out cold. He claims that a noise outside the house woke him out of the night. Might I remind you of the earplugs you wore to bed? Only I remembered that he took a swift bite of the big toe of the man to wake that man up. By the time the two of us poked our heads out the bedroom window, the speck might become large enough to identify. Instantly, I knew I was seeing firsthand something only whispered in the hall's mousedom. It was the Great One himself, Santa Claus. For generations, we legendary mice had come to prove his existence, but no one had ever. Only I remember it took a swift bite on the big toe to wake that man up. By the time the two of us poked our heads out the bedroom window, the speck had become large enough to identify. Instantly, I knew I was seeing firsthand something only run in the halls of Mousedom. It was the Great One himself, St. Nicholas, Santa Claus. For generations, we proved legendary mice had come close to his existence, but no one had ever seen him in the flesh. And now, I, Evan A. Mouse, was standing on the threshold of a major scientific breakthrough. The way Professor Moore tells the story, the reindeer were lively and quick that night, and Santa called each one by name. But my memory has not failed. Fame and fortune have not clouded my mind. Those reindeer barely made it up to our rooftop. They were totally exhausted. It was the tail end of their North American route. Santa Claus practically himself fell out of the sleigh. A crasher. No, I mean a crusher. No, what's your name? Reindeer. Stay there and don't move until I get back. Santa's scolding wasn't necessary. The minute their hooves touched our roof, those deer were down and dozing. After 3 tries, Santa got on his sack of toys on his back and trudged over our chimney. Somewhere south of New York, he had run in foul weather. His united his suit was plastered with sticky red mud. Messy, but it did not make the trip down the chimney a quick one. Downstairs, Professor Moore and I got our close look at a living legend. The professor remembers twinkling eyes and a nose like a red cherry. My superior powers of observation let me notice more details. The great one was suffering from a nasty cold. His eyes were watering, and he freely wiped his runny nose on a handkerchief. Once again, I sprang into action, pushing Santa into the professor's easy chair. Finally, I filled the children's stockings, and then I served Santa some hot chicken soup. These few moments of rest and drive made these all the difference that night. I convinced Santa that would not have been able to finish the roof, and I had not been able to give his first aid. Only one task remained, and that was up to get the good gentleman back to the chimney transportation. Santa jumped the professor, and I pushed from below, but it was hopeless. Finally, I pulled down the trap door to the attic and helped Santa climb out of the roof. The reindeer galloped into liftoff. Imagine my thrill as we heard these echoes across the night sky. Happy Christmas to all at Professor Moore's house. Special thanks to my good friend Evan A. Mouse. The rest, as I say, history. The professor tried to wrap up the operation, and a newspaper printed the article in 1822. Soon, people all over the world believe Santa Claus, loving, giving. But who gets all the credit for this? Not Evan A. Mouse. All I want is a simple correction. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not Evan A. Mouse. And that's the end of that story. Thanks for listening, and Merry Christmas, or whatever you celebrate. See you later.